Parents, does this sound familiar? Your child's constantly in motion. They're spinning until you get dizzy just watching them. They're jumping off furniture despite countless warnings. They're crashing into walls seemingly on purpose and seeking the loudest, brightest, most intense experiences that they can find. And maybe you've been told that they're just being a kid or that they'll grow out of it eventually. Or my personal favorite, have you tried being more consistent with your discipline? But deep down, you know that there's more to it than that. You look the child in the eyes. They're not trying to drive you crazy. It's almost like they're desperately seeking something their body needs, and no amount of redirection, consequences, or talking to them seems to make a difference. Today, I want to talk about what's really happening with sensory seeking kiddos. And I promise you, it's not bad parenting or a lack of discipline. It's neurology. So let me tell you about a story about a kid named Braulio. Braulio was a 7-year-old that came into our office with what his mom called perpetual motion machine syndrome. This kiddo would literally not stop moving. He'd spin in circles for minutes without getting dizzy. He'd jump off the furniture, the tables in the office, crash into the walls, chew through shirts and toys and even furniture. This kiddo was all over the place. And his parents were exhausted. Mornings were a battleground. Getting dressed involved sensory meltdowns over the clothing textures. Meal times were chaotic because he couldn't sit still for more than 30 seconds. And bedtime was a 2-hour marathon that left everyone drained. They tried everything. Reward charts and consequences and even occupational therapy, which helped somewhat, but didn't resolve the core issues. School was calling home weekly and other parents had stopped inviting him to play dates. And what struck me the most was when his mom said he's hungry for sensation, but no matter how much that he gets, it's never enough. And that's exactly what was happening. Braulio's nervous system was literally starving for sensory input because it couldn't process normal levels of sensation properly. Think about your nervous system like a stereo receiver. For most people, the volume is set at a comfortable level. Not too loud, not too quiet. But for sensory-seeking kiddos, it's like someone turned the volume all the way down. Regular, everyday input and sensations that you and I can feel clearly come through as whispers to them. So they're constantly turning up the intensity. They're spinning faster, they're jumping higher, they're crashing harder just to feel what we feel naturally. Now, it's not misbehavior. It's their body's desperate attempt to feed their nervous system the input that it's craving for. And in neuroscience terms, we call this hyposensitivity. So essentially undersensitivity to sensory input. I often tell parents, imagine if you were starving, but every food that you ate only gave you 10% of the taste, 10% of the nutrition. You'd probably eat constantly and seek out the spiciest, the saltiest, the most intense flavors just to feel satisfied. That's your sensory-seeking child's daily experience. So what causes this volume to get turned down in the first place? It's rarely just one thing, but rather what we call the perfect storm. It's a combination of factors that impact the nervous system, its development and regulation. This can begin before birth, when mom experienced high stress during pregnancy or had pregnancy complications. It continues through birth experiences, especially when there's interventions like forceps and vacuums and C-sections involved. Each of these creates physical, mental, emotional, chemical stress on the delicate nervous system. And then when you add in early childhood factors like ear infections treated with rounds and rounds and rounds of antibiotics, falls while they're learning to walk, or other physical and emotional stresses, you've got the perfect conditions for nervous system dysfunction to actually develop. The result is often subluxation or stress stuck onto the nervous system, which isn't necessarily about bones being out of place or things not moving. It's about the interrupted communication between our brain and our body that affects how sensory information is processed. And I see this play out in families every single day. It's the child that can't get enough proprioceptive input, or they crash into things. The kid that craves vestibular stimulation, so they move and they spin and they jump nonstop. Or the child that's touching and looking for tactile input. They touch every single thing in the room, the corners of the TV or the picture frames, and they just want to be squeezed or held under a weighted blanket for hours on end. These aren't behavior problems. They're neurological seeking patterns. And many sensory seeking kids don't get referred to occupational therapy early enough. But occupational therapy is incredibly helpful. OTs are amazing at providing sensory diets and strategies that can make daily life more manageable. But here's the challenge. If we're not addressing the root nervous system dysfunction, we're just constantly managing symptoms rather than resolving the underlying cause. It's like having a car with misaligned wheels. You can keep replacing the tires as they wear unevenly, but until you fix the alignment, you're having the same problem over and over and over again. And this explains why many parents tell me that OT helped, but we kept hitting plateaus. Or the sensory diets helped, they worked, but not consistently. So without addressing the neurological component, the results are often incomplete. And this is where our neurological approach makes a critical difference. So using the insight scans, we actually measure how your child's nervous system is functioning. So not just guessing based off behaviors or checking boxes off of a chart. We're looking for specific patterns of stress and dysregulation within our autonomic nervous system. It's that part that controls those automatic functions like our heart rate and our breathing rate and our digestion and our sleep, but also our sensory processing. So what we often find in sensory seeking kids is a pattern called dysautonomia. It's an imbalance between the sympathetic gas pedal, stressed side, and the parasympathetic brake pedal of our nervous system. And when this happens, the brain and the body are not communicating properly about the sensory information coming in. But by addressing these specific patterns through this precise, gentle care that we give, we help restore proper neurological function. This doesn't just happen overnight, just like your child didn't develop these patterns overnight, but the changes can be remarkable within these kiddos. And when neurological function improves, parents typically notice several changes. So a decreased intensity of sensory seeking behavior. So spinning and crashing and jumping start to decrease as the body receives adequate sensory input through normal day-to-day activities. The improved ability for transitions. Now, those transitions can be brutal between play to not play, getting ready for school, leaving fun, etc. But they become smoother as the nervous system can better regulate between those stressed and calm states. We often see better sleep patterns. So many sensory seekers struggle with sleep, especially falling to sleep. But as neurological function improved, sleep often follows suit. The big one that I see across the board with all of my kiddos, not just sensory seekers, is the enhanced effectiveness of other therapies. So occupational therapy, speech therapy, ABA suddenly start to work better because the nervous system can integrate the changes that they're trying to accomplish properly. Now for Braulio, the transformation wasn't overnight, but it was steady. And within a month, his mom reported specifically he could sit through dinner without constantly getting up. He could handle getting his homework done without needing to constantly stop. And within 3 months, his teachers noticed that he could stay focused on classroom activities without requiring constant movement and getting up. And at 6 months, the chewing had virtually stopped. Bedtime was simple and was shortened to a reasonable 20-30 minutes. And today, Braulio still has more energy than most kiddos his age. And that's just his personality. But the desperate, insatiable seeking of sensation and input has transformed into a healthy, regulated environment of movement and activity. If you're the parent of a sensory-seeking child, I want you to know these 3 things. First, you are not alone. What you're experiencing is real. It's challenging, and it's not your fault. And second, your child isn't choosing to drive you crazy. Their brain and their body are genuinely trying to get what they need, the only way that they know how. And last, there is hope beyond just managing symptoms forever. And at our office, we specialize in helping sensory-seeking kids find neurological balance. And through our comprehensive consultation, the assessments, and the personalized care approach, we identify the specific patterns affecting your child and address them at the absolute source. So if you're tired of watching your child struggle and ready to try something different, click the link in our bio to learn more about our approach to sensory processing processing challenges, we'll start with a thorough consultation in the neurological assessment to be able to understand exactly what's happening within your child's nervous system. And together, we can help your child find the sensory regulation that they're desperately seeking for without having to spin, without having to crash or bounce their way through life to get it. Because every single child deserves to feel comfortable in their own body. And every parent deserves to know why their child behaves the way that they do and how to truly help them thrive.